when it comes to negotiations, people make them all the time. Sometimes they are very well balanced, and other times they are not. However, are there situations when negotiating ought not to take place? On whose terms are negotiations being made? There's areas where at times there's the terms of a loan that are negotiated. We may negotiate terms relating to employment hours or compensation for extra tasks performed. A student may even negotiate with a teacher for the opportunity to make up work and improve a grade. However, when it comes to God and His established plans and His will, what He has stated clearly through His Word and the direction that He is providing us, there is no room for negotiation. What I want us to consider this morning is the example of Pharaoh, and negotiating that he tried to make as God had sent Moses to him to free the nation of Israel, to lead them out of Egypt. And what we see there is God and Pharaoh in a battle of the wills. God sent Moses to Egypt. And in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 12, we know what God said would be. He said, "But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." God made it clear to Moses that they would come out of Egypt. The Exodus would happen, and they would come to that mountain. They would worship together at that mountain. But initially, as Moses was sent to Pharaoh, things didn't get better. In fact, they actually got worse. The work was made harder, and the people complained to Moses, and Moses then even complained to God. As we see in Exodus 5, verses 22 to 23, where we read, "Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, 'O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all.'" But what God still made clear, we note in the very next verse as we move into chapter 6 and verse 1. "But the Lord said to Moses, 'Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will send them out, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of the land, out of his land.'" God sent Moses to Egypt to free God's people from slavery under Pharaoh. And through the 10 plagues, God's power was displayed in a way that revealed that there is no other like Him. God encouraged Moses by revealing to him that Pharaoh would ultimately send the Israelites packing, as we know it here in chapter 6, verse 1. However, at first, we find that Pharaoh refused to give in even an inch in allowing the people to leave. Though Pharaoh would eventually try to negotiate 3 concessions for allowing the Israelites to go out into the wilderness to worship God, his first negotiations were clearly not done in good faith. And so we find that Pharaoh was not duly impressed at first with the power of God. For with the first plague, the plague of blood, Pharaoh was not impressed. He just turned around and went back into his palace. And the plagues went on from there, but Pharaoh would not listen, nor would he change his mind. As God sent the frogs, and the Egyptian ruler said the people could go, but then changed his mind. And then came the gnats, but Pharaoh would not listen. We'll consider the 4th, the 8th, and the 9th plagues in a moment. But with the 5th, the death of the livestock, the 6th, the boils, and the 7th, the hail, Pharaoh's heart was described as unyielding, his ear as unlistening, and his promise again not offered in good faith. Even when his magicians were urging him and others were urging him to let the people go, we find Pharaoh stubbornly refusing to let them. And so through God hardening the already unyielding heart of Pharaoh, God's power was demonstrated to be unmistakably more powerful than all of the gods of Egypt put together. Pharaoh was raised up for this very purpose. Pharaoh was even told this through Moses in Exodus 9, verse 16. Pharaoh was told that God had raised him up for that purpose. But as we think about this, how responsive are we? We may wonder about Pharaoh, but should we not wonder about our own selves in responding to God? Are we impressed with the power of God? Do we acknowledge that there truly is no other like him? Then let us keep the commitments that we have made to him. May we follow through in our responses to God's great love and faithfulness and trust his power to continue to work in our life. But as we go back to the text again here in the battle of the wills between Pharaoh and God, we see Pharaoh wanting to make a deal as he negotiated 3 concessions, the first of which we note. When God sent the 4th plague, the flies, we find the first of 3 concessions that Pharaoh attempted to negotiate with Moses for allowing the Israelites to go out into the wilderness. Note the terms that Pharaoh offered. And as we look at each of these 3, also consider what Satan is behind in negotiations, and as Satan works through the world, but Satan behind this in trying to keep us from being fully committed or fully surrendered to God. We read in Exodus chapter 8 and verses 25 to 28. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to your God within the land." But Moses said, "It would not be right to do so, for the offerings we shall sacrifice to the Lord our God are an abomination to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice offerings abominable to the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not stone us? We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God, as he tells us." So Pharaoh said, "I will let you go to sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness, only you must not go very far away. Plead for me." And so here's the first negotiation, and we think of what Satan is behind and his rationale and his suggestion. Be religious, but don't go very far. As we see here in verse 25, worship where you are, in the privacy of your own home. Don't be public about your faith. Just keep it to yourself. Or this idea of, he says, okay, you're going to go into the wilderness, just don't go very far. The manner in which this advice of Satan is spoken through the world is in statements such as this: it's okay to be a little religious, but don't get carried away. Don't get too involved with God. Go ahead and believe he exists, but let it go at that. It's fine for you to be involved in good works, but don't worry about changing your life. Live a little, have some fun. Go ahead and worship God, but you only need to do it once in a while. Why don't you just pick 2 days a year and worship God on those days? And so the pleading to our own heart is, how far are we willing to go? Are we merely nominal Christians? Are we willing to do only what we think we have to do? The minimum to get by. Jesus went the distance for us, didn't he? He endured and went all the way to the cross to pay the price for our sins and to secure our redemption. How are we responding to that reality? How far are we willing to go to show our sincere appreciation for his gift of salvation? Have we attempted to just step inside the gates of the kingdom so that when religion is not convenient for us, we can just kind of slip back out again? Or have we entered the realm of his eternal kingdom to live and to serve as the faithful citizens we ought to be under the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? God had a promised land in mind for the nation of Israel to lead them toward. But God has an eternal promised land planned for us that he is continuing to lead us toward. And so may our life be compelled by a great and wholehearted love in response to all God has provided for our life. Let our daily walk reveal a willingness to go all the way through life with him. Then we know the attempt at negotiating a second concession. When God sent the 8th plague, the locusts, we're presented with the second of 3 concessions. As Pharaoh attempted to negotiate with Moses for allowing the Israelites to go into the wilderness to worship God. And so in Exodus 10, verses 8 through 11, we read, "So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. And he said to them, 'Go serve the Lord your God. But which ones are to go?' And Moses said, 'We will go with our young and our old. We will go with our sons and daughters, and with our flocks and herds. For we must hold a feast to the Lord.' But he said to them, 'The Lord be with you if ever I let you and your little ones go. Look, you have some evil purpose in mind. No. Go, the men among you, and serve the Lord, for that is what you were asking.' And they were driven out of Pharaoh's presence." Satan's suggestion in line with this is, if you must go, if you must worship, if you must be religious, don't drag others into it. Satan's desire is to get us to rationalize and advises negotiations. If you are bent on worshiping God, go ahead, but don't drag your family and others into it. If it's your thing, go and do it, but leave it at that. And so what marks the sphere of our inclusion and what we are attempting to do and how we're attempting to influence others around us? If we leave the family behind, it is very possible that in time they may be the very ones to draw us back, to pull us away. Their involvement, on the other hand, can encourage our further involvement. Now, we don't have control over the desires and wishes of others, but what are we attempting to do? Are we attempting to bring our families along and to bring others along? There's a lot of truth in the notion families who pray together stay together. But it is also true that a house divided, as we note Jesus' warning in Mark 3:25, that a house divided cannot stand. Especially when it comes to religion, that will be most often become the greatest source of conflict. There was a young woman a number of years ago who shared with me that within her relations, those who were religious were adamant about it, and those who were not religious were adamant about that. And she was faced both with those who would encourage and those who would greatly discourage her faith. A family united in true faith will be a great strength to us. Shared values bring stability within the family and to other areas of family life. That family unit is also provides support for continued faithfulness to God through a sense of accountability to one another, keeping each other on track in our faith. We don't just let our religious hair down, so to speak, within the home, being relaxed there spiritually, but we need to be just as spiritual within the home as we are living our life amongst one another, living our life in this world, that to recognize the elements of being salt and light, just as significant within the home as in other areas of our daily life. The same is true also with the church, with God's family, the family of God. We need each other, and we ought to let each other know it, and having a sense of accountability with one another helps to strengthen and guide. Worshiping God is for men, women, and children, for everyone to be drawn to God. He desires to be the God of us all. So may we do our part to keep from leaving others behind. And then in Exodus 10:24, we come to Pharaoh's attempt at the third concession. When God sent the ninth plague, the darkness, we read the third concession. Pharaoh attempted to negotiate with Moses for allowing the Israelites to go into the wilderness to worship God. And so, Exodus 10:24, we read, Then Pharaoh called Moses and said, Go serve the Lord. Your little ones also may go with you. Only let your flocks and your herds remain behind. If they left their possessions behind, there'd be a drawing back toward them. And you see, Satan's suggestion to us is go along. Just don't be a contributor. If you really must be religious, if you really must worship, and your family has to be involved too, go ahead. Just don't commit any of your possessions to your religion. Hold your money back. Give yourself to God, but hold back your possessions. If you must worship, don't give every aspect of your life to God. And so, is there anything that we are withholding from God? If we have truly given ourselves to God, everything we own should also be viewed as belonging to God. Our life is given to Him. God gives us these things, our possessions, and wants us to be good stewards of them. And so how well are we using what we have to the glory of God? Or are there times when our possessions are actually drawing us away from God? Remember the example of the Macedonian Christians. As we commit our life to the Lord, He gives it back with the desire that we will use it to His glory. And as we give our life to Him as a free will offering, His will is for that to continue to be characteristic of our life and all that we have. This spirit was seen among the Macedonian Christians. And Paul used them as an example to the Corinthians to follow through on their giving. As we read in 2 Corinthians 8 and verses 1 through 5, where we read, We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means, of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. You see where it began with them. As they had given themselves first, given their very lives to the Lord, then they were compelled to give of whatever else they had to the glory of God and of the service to others. Because these Christians had been fully committed, they had been fully surrendered to the Lord, they were eager to use whatever they possessed to meet the needs of others to the glory and the praise of God. Their willingness to give was an acknowledgement of their thanks for what they had been given. And they gave themselves fully. May we truly come to understand what it means for ourselves to be given fully over to the Lord. So what marks our response then to the will of God and what He has commanded us to do? Are we willing to go the distance? Are we striving to include our family and others? Now, choices will be up to them, but are we reaching out? Are we willing to surrender all we possess to God's purposes as well? In Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 2, Paul encouraged those to whom he wrote at Rome, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Are we giving our life to God in this way? Are we presenting our life to Him as a living sacrifice on a daily basis? Living our life as worship to Him. Let us be willing to surrender fully to God's will. It will bless our life as He ultimately draws us to where He wants us to be. Each day being lived for Him. Let us not try to negotiate. Let us not allow Satan to draw us into negotiating with God. Let us recognize the good and the acceptable and perfect will of God as we surrender to living in accordance with it. Because it is in that way that we will be the most blessed now and eternally.